Hello, and welcome to the Product Insiders LinkedIn Live series, in which we interview product leaders and learn how they leveraged customer insights to navigate tough product decisions. I'm your host, Zach Lyons, managing partner of Agile Innovation Advisors. Now, if you're joining us live today, can you please enter where you are from in the chat so we know who is with us? You can just enter your city or your country if you're out of the United States. And today we will be speaking with our special guest, Wade Powell, head of product at HHI Corporation. And I'll be asking Wade questions about his product decisions and the situation. But if you have any specific questions for Wade, please enter them in the chat and we'll get to them in a bit. So without further ado, let's begin. Wade, thank you so much for joining us today. So our show is really about tough product decisions you've had to navigate in your career. In thinking about that, can you tell us a little bit about your role at the time and the situation you were in?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, and I'm happy to be here with you, Zach. And we go back a little ways, a few years back. So I'm going to go back to a little bit of a story about when it was back in about 2010, and I was working for Lexmark, which is a printer company at the time, and my role or my title was Innovation Strategy Manager. And so I was responsible for understanding customer needs for the company and helping to develop innovation strategies for the company in general. And the company had printers that were inkjet printers as well as laser printers, so two different technologies. And I was trying to help them understand what the customers were looking for and where we could innovate and grow the company. So that was kind of my role at the time. And then, yeah, so related to that, we were looking for opportunities for growth and used a jobs to be done approach to try to study customers and understand what their needs were and where their needs were unmet. And so we conducted a huge survey. It was really large. Ended up surveying over 1,500 customers in that space to find out what their needs were. Look for what was really important to them, and then where they were not quite satisfied, and look for that important and unsatisfied or unmet needs. And we actually studied. Did you have something you wanted to?
I was going to ask you. So before we dive into the study results, I was just curious. So you were trying to drive growth, but was there any specific challenge or issue you were trying to overcome at the time, or was it more just generally driving growth in the business?
Well, at the time I had been asking, I was working in R&D in product development, and I was asking the company, do you have anything that could help guide me in the work that I'm doing? I'm working on this new printer. What are the customers needing? We might be able to tweak this or that as we work on this development, but I don't really have a lot of market insights and research. Do we have some data? And what they had to provide was pretty weak. It wasn't directed in the direction that I needed to be able to design products better. And I was aware of the jobs to be done approach, so I started asking more questions. Does anyone know about this? It can help you be very successful and bring the insights that you need to really drive innovation. Well, the company didn't know anything about it, so I started, preaching that gospel to them a little bit. And I found a couple of people that were really interested and said, yes, that's the type of information we need as well. And we're tasked to go get this and do this for the company. Why don't you change the role that you're in and move out of R&D and come over and help us? And you can help the whole company work on that because you have some background in that. You've learned about it. So that's kind of where I started. My problem was I needed more information to be able to do my job better. The company said, yes, we need that too, and we don't have someone to do that. So why don't you become that person for the company? And then you might be able to use it and go back into that role in R&D and product development again and use the information that you find.
Gotcha. Okay. So interesting. So you really spearheaded the movement to using jobs to be done insights to help you in making these product decisions. And so I interrupt you before. You were saying that you had a large number of insights and doing a survey. Do you recall like how many people you surveyed and what were the results of the project itself?
Yeah, so we interviewed a bunch of people. We had another company work with us to help us gather that information, but we did survey over 1,500 customers.
Wow.
And that was based off of more than 600 different jobs or outcome statements as well. So it was a very large study. And we did look at the job of printing. So people that were printing, scanning, faxing, as well as related jobs related to printing, and then the consumption chain. So purchasing, making that decision to purchase something, obtaining the product, setting it up, installing it, getting it going, and then dealing with when do you throw away your printer or your all-in-one device and get a new one, an upgrade. So we looked at all those, and that was over 600 different statements that we were finding out how important that was to people and how satisfied they were relative to those statements. So huge, a lot of data that came back.
Yeah, I can imagine. So what did you end up doing as a result of that? How did you move forward?
So when we got all this data, it was a lot of information. And as I've thought about it, it felt a lot like having like a huge bucket of ice cream. It was, ice cream's good stuff. I like ice cream. It was a huge bucket. How do you deal with a huge bucket? And then if I took that data and handed it to somebody and said, here's this huge bucket of ice cream, go ahead, have at it. It was too much of a good thing. It was they couldn't consume all of that, and they didn't know what to do with that. So one of the insights that I had is giving people just a whole bucket of ice cream is not the right thing to do. You need to give them like a serving size of that and serve it up with some toppings that are good for them instead of giving the whole bucket. The whole bucket's just going to waste. It's going to melt and not do any good. There's very few people that can take advantage of that whole bucket of ice cream. Same thing with all this data. It's a little too much. And if you can cut off just the right amount for the right team and give them some of the other toppings they need around it, so some context around this, and here's a theme that we saw in the data that your team can act on, then you can get some action and you can get something out of it. And that has value to that group. Where even though there's more value in all the data, they can't act on it. It's too much of a good thing. It's just too much. They can't get started. They don't know where to go.
So it's interesting. You started with sort of a scarcity of insight on the market. You commissioned a jobs to be done study, but ended up with too much, almost overwhelming you. That some happy medium in there would have been ideal, I assume.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with all that data. It's just that you can't serve that up to everybody. So yeah, there's the worst is having no data at all and just guessing your way through it. It's better to have data, but then you need to get the right amount of data to take action on. And you can either piecemeal it and do a little bit at a time or share it with other people so that they can all kind of consume that data and use it for their purposes of the whole company. But somebody's got to meter that out a little bit, make it into an ice cream, chocolate covered ice cream stick, that people are happy with. And then you can serve those things out. So that's what I started doing to try to get some traction.
Okay.
But there was one need that was really interesting that came back from that survey that was not expected. And I kept trying to share that with different groups to say, could you do something with this? And they said, that's a need that's already been addressed. But the survey had shown that it wasn't addressed. It was really important to almost all the people surveyed. And they said that they weren't satisfied with it. And that need statement was something like protect your electrical devices from power surges. So it's related to printing. And we knew that that's probably important. No one wants to lose their printer device after they've invested in that.
Sure.
But we thought, hey, there's surge protectors all over the market. It's well mapped. Why are people saying that they're unsatisfied and they can't meet that need that they had? And so as I dug into it a little further, just one job statement tried to look into it a little bit more and a little bit more. I started asking people, well, what surge protector would you use for this printer? Asking employees at the company, which one would you use? Electrical engineers, asking them that question. And they came back and said, well, I don't know. I'm not sure which one's the right one. I know some of them are bad for laser printers. They cause problems, the way that they're designed, and others are fine. And then there's these different joule ratings out there. I don't know which one's the right one. And I said, so that's the problem. There is probably the right one out there, but nobody knows what it is. And these surge protector companies are trying to have one size fits all. And you can use it for all kinds of things. What the customer needed was someone to tell them, you don't have to think through this. We have designed this one to meet the requirements of this device or our devices. So that's what I started doing. I worked with the electrical team, the electrical engineering team, and it said, this is all we need to do. We don't need to do everything that the other printers, the surge protectors are doing, just what we needed to do to protect our device. And so when we got down to that, we came up with the best device that would work really well and meet our needs, and it was just focused on the needs of those printers. And the whole line of printers we had, we made sure it could cover all of those and be good and safe for all of those. And we ended up coming up with a printer surge protector. I think I've shared a picture with you to you could show what that would look like.
Yeah, let's show that. Okay.
It's really quite simple. So what we did is we took the power cord that was coming from the wall, whatever wall around the world it went into, it had a certain plug that would go into the back of the printer. We introduced this device to go in between that power cord and the printer. And so you're just plugging in the same size power connector into it. You also have your data line coming in that you can plug in and protect from power surges through that as well. Once you've plugged them in, it just passes through this and it's protecting both of those lines. There's one LED that would light up on the top to show that it was protected and working. Once that protected and blew out to stop a power surge, that light would go off and they would get a free replacement. So that's all. We just told them this has been designed for your printer, and this is all it has to do. We really took out the extras and put in only what was needed. And in doing that, we found that the product cost was really low, but the value to the customer was extremely high because they didn't have to do any other work, and any other alternatives cost more anyway. So it turns out that we found that we could generate an additional $3.5 million of revenue each year from one small product line that was only used for Lexmark's products. It wasn't for a general market necessarily, but because it answered the questions that the customers had and gave them confidence, then they would spend more money on one thing because they knew it was the right thing. And it was coming from the company that developed the products anyway. And that turned out to pay off all the investment to make it and design it and develop it and get the parts and tool it all up. It paid off that full investment with the profits that it generated in less than half of a year. So it was break even and then making extra money from that point on.
It's really interesting because it's not the core product. You're selling printers, but yet this is an add-on ancillary product, really, again, outside the core that addressed this feeling of confidence. So it wasn't necessarily just about protecting, but feeling confident that they are protecting it because, in this case, Lexmark was saying this is made for your printer. And so people didn't have to guess what's the right product. So you kind of took away that guesswork. It's interesting.
Yeah, and it was one thing that all the other surge protector companies couldn't say. They didn't know. They didn't have the time to go figure that out on every device that it could be used on. So when you get down to what the customer was really struggling with and wanted to spend money on, because they do want to protect it, it's like insurance. It's worth having there. And then when it goes out, it was an easy thing to replace. It wasn't built into the printer. Because when it fails in a printer to protect it, now you still have to replace something because of the way that they protect. So this is the easier one to replace. You just pull it right back out and you can still power up your device without the protection, and you can get a replacement.
So lots of benefits to the customer. Yeah. Easy to replace, free replacement, which is great. So let me ask you this, Wade, just to kind of shift a little bit into our final question I have. In thinking back about your experience, right, going from this scarcity of insights to an overwhelming amount that you really had to hone down, picking one and then running with it. I mean, if you were doing this again, what would you do differently? Is there something how you would approach this whole challenge of coming out with a new product and launching it differently? I mean, this wasn't really what you were thinking of when you originally set out to build a new product, right? It wasn't a surge protector. It was, I'm assuming, a printer or some type of printer.
So I think what I learned from that is that the work that we did to understand the customer needs was very useful, but it was so much information. And in the beginning, we were just trying to share it with everyone. Here's the data set. Here's all the opportunities that you could go after. But that was just too much, and no one could get any action on it. So I found in the process, what I really learned, what I would do differently is from the very beginning, as I got the information back, I would try to find specific groups that could take advantage of sections of that data set that we got back, those insights, and kind of spoon feed, or at least serving size, what they need and can work with. When I finally came across that's the magic and the sauce is breaking it down, then I started to see a lot more action. Now, this one need that I talked about, that was one that no one could really feel like they could understand why it was there. So I went ahead and pulled that back to myself. I said, I'm a designer. I'm not an electrical engineer. I'm mechanical. Well, I can talk to these electrical engineers and help them understand what is needed, and they can design the guts of this. But the overall product, I can help them understand what it needs to do and what we need to say about it, and it made it successful. In fact, the company recognized this as the top entrepreneurial or innovation that came out of the whole company, and they looked at all kinds of technologies. But this was the one that was so cheap, it was just waiting for someone to take it. What's interesting, and if there's anyone watching this video and you're in a company that's producing electronics, this is a need that your customers have as well. You can copy and do almost the same thing, just take the same approach, and you've got another product line that you could add to your products to protect. Don't do it inside, do it outside of that product as an ancillary product, and just make sure it is designed to protect your device. Add that information as you sell it to a customer, and it'll be a very easy add-on to add to your product line and upsell, to add one more item to it. And then very high margins on this. I think this was north of 60 to 70% gross margin. It was a great product. It just paid itself off so fast.
And 60, 70% margins, that's not what you get in printers. So this.
Oh, yeah, it's usually software, right? Not hardware. So
right.
When you come across that, that's a cool product.
Wow. That's just it's a fascinating story about having that insight that you need to really make a decision. Although you weren't actually sure exactly where you were headed before you got the data, but you knew you needed data. That data and that insight led you down a path to a product that, as you said, won an innovation award, great ROI, it was a win. So even though you'd been in the printer business for, I'm sure, a number of years at that point, and you thought you knew everything, this ended up still, I guess, surprising you to some degree, right? It wasn't something that was right front and center.
Yeah, and there are opportunities to innovate in any space. If you're asking the right questions and gathering the information, sometimes it's not obvious why that need is there. If you probe a little bit further, you can figure out why it's there. And usually you've got some smart people in every company that can help address those needs and come up with some interesting solutions. But you've got to understand the need first and then apply a solution to it instead of the other way around.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And most people would think printers are a commodity business, right? And there's no more opportunity to innovate, but you just proved that's not correct.
There's always new opportunities. Sometimes you have to take the industry in a different direction. But if you look at the needs, what they're trying to accomplish, the customers, you can always find a new place to innovate.
Love it. Well, I think we're actually just about out of time, so we can wrap up with that note. Thank you so much, Wade, for participating today. We hope you guys, learned at least, one new thing from the conversation. I myself thought that it was a very fascinating story. I love hearing how you can take one need from a huge study and actually innovate and grow from that. So please feel free. If you have questions, you can enter them in the chat. If you're not entering live right now, what we'll do is we can continue the conversation later because LinkedIn keeps the video there. And so we can always go back and answer questions in the future. And I do encourage you to stay tuned for our next Product Insiders event. It'll be right here on LinkedIn. We'll be getting back to you soon on who that will be, working on a couple of guests. But until next time, I'm your host, Zach Lyons with Agile Innovation Advisors. And again, our special guest, Wade Powell. So take care.
Thank you, Zach.
Thank you.